This is Uncollared, off-the-cuff conversations between progressive pastors at the intersection of religion, politics, and culture. I'm Todd Leonard. I'm senior pastor with Glendale City Church. In a moment, I'll be joined by Jonathan Stoner, a chaplain with City of Hope and a postulant to the priesthood in the Episcopal Church, and also by Shane Kinnison, senior pastor at First Baptist Church of Glendale. Today is the first of a two-part series on the future of the church after COVID. What most pastors know is that the Christian church has been in trouble for many years. But what COVID has done is revealed that to everybody. Church is losing its relevance. Today we start that conversation amongst the three of us, and then we'll continue it in next week's episode. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Hey guys, it's great to be back with you again this week. How's everybody doing? Jonathan, I know that you are kind of in between things right now.
Yeah, my last day at Glendale Memorial was on Friday, and got to celebrate with the staff there, and had a few goodbye parties on the different units. And bittersweet. It's bittersweet because I really came to love that place and my colleagues there. ICU staff actually took me out to a local watering hole in Glendale on Saturday night. So that was really fun to be celebrated by them. And just, I think even after everything we went through in the pandemic, it just, I think it bonded us. Like, I mean, the only comparison I can think of, and I've never been in a war, but my friends who've been in the military talk about the way that bonds you. And I feel like what we went through this last year, caring for folks with COVID and seeing so many folks die, it bonds you like nothing else will. So it was bittersweet, but I'm really looking forward to these next 2 weeks off before I start at City of Hope at the end of the month. And I gotta say, I looked at my Fitbit app this morning, and I got almost 9 hours of sleep last night. It was some of the best sleep I have had in over a year, probably.
That's good.
Wow.
So I'm feeling great today.
Good.
That's great. Shane, how are you doing? How's normal life or somewhat normal life going back to church?
Sure. Thanks, Todd. First of all, Jonathan, congratulations on the new assignment, and know you'll do well there. We have really enjoyed you here in Glendale as a ministry and spiritual presence, and we will miss you here. But congratulations, and we hope all goes well. And I'm glad you were celebrated. I like that term.
Yeah.
I'm glad you were celebrated. We're 2 Sundays in now to in-person and live streaming worship simultaneously. And things are going relatively well, working out some bugs and kinks. But other than that, it's good to be back together. We'll be talking about a little bit of that later on today. And but it's interesting at this juncture. It does feel kind of weird, and you feel a little out of sync or a little out of rhythm. But we're going to be finding that rhythm a little more as we go along.
I think there was and I can't remember where I read this or saw an interview, that there really is, I think, for a lot of us now, as we're emerging from pandemic, not just in the church context, but in a lot of other ways, learning how to be social again, learning the normal body language and postures and small talk skills. You know, all those things have kind of we've lost, things have gotten a little rusty on, and I think I've been feeling that. Getting back to church, and small talk is a huge part of being a pastor, and that's definitely been rusty for me. So it is. I know the awkward feeling. I've been feeling it too. But yeah, I think that's what we want to kind of focus in on today, is this being church now that we're starting to come out of pandemic. What does that look like, and is it going to be the same as it was before? And I one of the things that we hope this podcast does is maybe for people who aren't in the church or religion business, who aren't pastors or rabbis or clergy, uh, that you get a little insight into some of our thought process that you maybe don't normally get access to on a regular basis. And and I think today maybe you're going to get a little bit more of that insight. And that the main thing that we're going to talk about today is that the three of us here and many of our friends and colleagues in the religion business have known this for a long time, that church has been in trouble, that the faith communities that we serve in and that our friends and colleagues serve in, they're not doing well by and large. They're in decline, and more people, especially in cities like Los Angeles, more and more people no longer find church important or relevant to their lives. And we ourselves, as clergy, on any given week, will tell you that we ourselves honestly wish we could be doing something else than being at church on the weekend, because we sometimes have felt like it's no longer relevant to our lives. And so this is one of those things where we feel like we're facing a challenge of something that's becoming increasingly irrelevant, and asking ourselves, what do we do? Is there a way to get it back? But rather than just going on anecdotal evidence and stories that the three of us could share, Shane actually found real research on this. And Shane, why don't you kind of give us a little bit of insight into what's happening with the churches, especially here in the COVID era?
Sure. Thank you, Todd. This is hot off the press with Religion News Service, RNS, and it's entitled More Churches Are Closing Than Opening. So let me just share a couple of points with you briefly, and then we'll enter into a discussion. There are two studies that are referenced in this article. One is from Lifeway Research, and the other is from the Center for Analytics, Research and Data, a group affiliated with the United Church of Christ, or UCC. In this article, it indicates that, first of all, there are between 320 and 350,000 Protestant churches in the United States. And so a closure of 4,500 churches in 2019 comes out to a loss of about 1.4%. And while that seems like a small percentage, it's still a window into a larger dynamic at play that I think, Todd, you have already begun to address in your opening statements. I want to key in on the research that was done by the Center for Analytics, Research and Data, indicating that in the decade ending in 2020, so that was just recently, it was during COVID. In the decade ending in 2020, 3,850 to 7,700 houses of worship closed per year in the United States, which is an equivalent of 75 to 150 congregations each week. That's disturbing.
Yeah.
And it's sobering for us to hear that. And that the same study predicts that those numbers will at least double, if not triple, in the wake of the pandemic. And this post-COVID life and post-COVID reality for churches and houses of worship is something that we're watching closely, aren't we? The biggest reason for church closings in this study is the decline in membership. Well, that makes sense. That's kind of common sense, as it were, but the research proves it. And by way of numbers, this is the telling part. A poll in the month of March from the Gallup group found that fewer than one half of Americans, that's 47%, fewer than one half of Americans say they belong to a church, synagogue, or mosque. And that number is down from 70% in 2000. So in that period of time, we have now gone to fewer than one half of all Americans, indicating that they are in any wise connected to any kind of organized religion. So it's almost like a perfect storm that is brewing right in front of our eyes.
That Gallup poll that came out there back in March, that was an earth-shaking revelation for religion in America at large, because that was the first time that we saw that number go below 50%. But to see that decline happen so quickly shows the trending in society away from religion and how quickly it is going to grow.
Yeah, I was just out with a friend from seminary yesterday, and we were just talking because he's going to be planning a church here in this next year. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, wow, you're planning a church after the pandemic and you've still got hopes for this whole enterprise. I was like, God bless you, sir. So he's also a hospital chaplain like me. And his vision is to be a bivocational pastor because he says, that's the future as far as he's concerned. And I think for a lot of millennials that I talk to and Zoomers who are coming up behind us, it seems like that's kind of the vision, is that there will be this move away from the institutional church to more of the house church kind of model, or more of a storefront, kind of church. There is this move away from the institutional church and away from the pastor's livelihood being tied to the congregation's checkbooks. And I think that might free the pastors, priests up to actually say the things that people need to hear and long to hear and want to hear, instead of being so worried about preserving the institution or keeping our jobs, that we're actually not able to share news that's actually good news and that actually challenges and might maybe ruffles feathers, but kind of is the stuff that we need to hear, because we all need to change and grow and evolve and deal with our junk.
Currently, the average pastor across denominational lines in America is 57 years old. And over the last 20 years or more, there has been a statistical decrease in the numbers and percentages of people in religious studies, seminaries, preparing for the pastorate. They're making preparations for other opportunities, whether it's missions or various kinds of ministries or leadership opportunities, but preparing for the pastorate has fallen in decline. And when you think about the average pastor in America being 57 years old today, well, Todd and I are right there in that mix. And so we are living relics as we sit with you today on this podcast, because we are one of the last generation of pastors to be called into congregational settings with full-time salaries or benefit structures or various kinds of retirement opportunities, things of that nature. And these younger ministers, whoever they may be, coming in behind us, many of them will not have those platforms, those financial platforms and financial resources that we have had.
And like you said, Jonathan, you see this as a gift. And I concur with you. I see this as an absolute gift to the two religions of all stripes, and certainly in my context, Christianity. Um, but obviously, so many of those who are in positions of power are those 57 and older, and for them, it is still uh, the idea of trying to salvage the institution and resurrect it somehow. In my denomination, the one benefit that we have, and any denomination here in Southern California has, is investment in property. And the one thing you could do is you could sell a bunch of property and put that money into supporting bivocational pastors who want to give 10, 20 hours a week to do something in a house, or to do something, meeting in a coffee shop, or meeting someplace else, and doing something with 40 or 50 people, that's a relevant small community, rather than meeting with the 10 or 15 people in a large antiquated building that's sucking so many resources down the drain. Um, there is so much potential to 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 shift to new ideas if people are willing to take that action now. They actually would have some resources to put into trying new things. And my concern is that too many of the institutions will try to cling on till the very last minute, till every dollar has gone down the drain.
It's so sad, but it's I think that's my biggest fear too. At the same time, honestly, and maybe it's because I don't have a lot of skin in the game yet, because I don't, my income is not tied to a church, so maybe that gives me more freedom. But I think for me, talking with my friend the other day, I just got excited just thinking about what ministry could look like in the years to come, because in my experience working in hospitals, working in the LA County jails, people are hungry. They're hungry for spirituality. They're hungry for connecting to God, connecting to the divine, connecting to the holy, to the sacred. Yep. But the thing is maybe what's different from previous generations is that they're not going to the church at the center of the town to encounter God or to encounter, the divine. They're finding it elsewhere, in a yoga class. They're finding it in a conference or a podcast, or they're finding it in other ways, and or even going to the park on a Sunday morning with friends and having a picnic. They're actually finding some really rich connections with their fellow humans and their fellow creatures, and I think that for me, I'm just kind of, it's funny because my friend that I met with, he comes from a charismatic background, like I do. I've really lost touch with that whole side of my upbringing, but talking with him, it brought back those memories of kind of going where the Spirit leads, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I kind of do wonder if we're in that kind of a season of the Spirit blows where the Spirit's going to blow, and it's kind of like the Spirit moves where the Spirit's going to move, and maybe we're at the cusp of something new and kind of going out into uncharted waters. And for me, that's thrilling, even though I know that it means that what's come before might die or might not exist in the same way that it did.
Well, is this not, my friends, the equivalency of life itself, and how we journey through this in a healthy way? There's always loss. There's always letting go. So there's death, there's burial, and there's new life. There's resurrection. Resurrection never comes until death has first come. Resurrection never comes until burial has first come. But resurrection is on the horizon. And the resurrection is reality. So here we have the three of us who understand from clinical, pastoral, and spiritual positions that there is something healthy about a process that will lead us through the losing, through the letting go, and through the new life, whatever that might be. And because all religion and politics are local, we have to bore down into our local context. Because, Todd, you're right. The denomination as an entity, organization, it may never get it. It may get it too late. But what happens here and now, where we live and have our being, you and I, and those watching this podcast, we are the ones who are a part of the losing, the letting go, and the new life. And as Jonathan indicated earlier, one of my favorite teachings of Jesus is when he said, in referencing the Holy Spirit, he said, consider the wind. You don't know where it's going. You cannot know where it comes from. You only know that it's blowing, and so is the movement of the Spirit. So I believe in my own journey of life and faith that the Spirit is moving and the Spirit is active in all of this pandemic and post-pandemic living that we're experiencing. The question for us is, what do we need to focus on? How do we make ourselves open and receptive and available to what's happening around us and within us, even as our own context is changing in real time right in front of our eyes? This might be an opportunity to delve into a second article for today and to consider the characteristics that we might begin to deem very important in these days to come.
Yeah, I think this article that I looked at by Jim Capaldo, who's with this organization Converge Heartland, he wrote an article with some of his peers entitled "What's Next? Post-Pandemic Church Ministry." And they talked about 11 principles, and I'm not going to go through all 11, but some of the ways that they feel like churches needed to shift to address life post-pandemic, and really not just post-pandemic, but post-Christianity, post-institutional Christianity. What is church? And of course, this, I think, applies in a lot of context to other religious life as well. But since the three of us are all in the Christian context, that's the context we're focusing more specifically on. But they talked about a couple things that I'll bring out is that there just needs to be a lot more agility, flexibility to what we do, and that comes with, again, like your friend Jonathan, starting something new and small allows you to be a lot more adaptable to where the Spirit leads, as opposed to having a monolithic structure that requires all sorts of committees and processes to make any change at all. So where you can free ministry from all the structure that has been put in place over the years in institutionalized context, the more you can align with what the mission of God is doing right now in your local community. Another one is, they said that what COVID has revealed is that you can do a lot of things online, but you can't do fellowship. That there is something about the human, we need each other. And so what we do, there needs to be a high priority on interactive connectivity over content delivery. We can do content delivery online, or if we do it in a community setting or a gathering, we can do it much more briefly than maybe we've done it in the past, concisely. But that we really emphasize that socialization, and then also the idea of not only thinking about bringing people together for fellowship, but if you're going to bring people together also for mission, for actually building relationships beyond the walls of the church. We'll conclude the first half of our conversation there, and we'll pick up with it next week with part 2. Thanks for listening to the conversation, and we would love your feedback. Please email us at uncollarpodcast@gmail.com. You can find Uncollared wherever you get your podcast, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. You can watch us on YouTube, and please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.